Hey, and welcome to everyone. We are live currently with Sena and Adrian Bijinada from Spartan and OCRWC. Now, this came about by a little bit by accident, and I think you all know why after what is being termed Mona-gate. But we thought it was a great opportunity to kind of tackle that subject as OCRWC being a partner of Spartan this year, and also any other community questions that come up. We're also going to be joined by Chris Maltby from Tough Mudder, Russ Blatt from OCR Buddy, and Josh Chace from Inside OCR. But before we get going, Adrian, I'm going to pass over to you.
Yeah, so I thought it'd be good to do a little bit of table setting and just explain why we're here. So like some other people, I woke up Sunday morning to a bunch of messages and screenshots sent my way as a result of a post that Spartan put up, right? I think some people have seen the post, some haven't, but I won't describe it in great detail, but the post was of Mona Lisa, the famous Da Vinci painting from the 1500s, wearing a Spartan headband, and one interpretation could be more modernized. So we'll get to that in a second, right? But the messages that landed in my inbox were largely along the lines of like, hey, good job, this is who you're working with, right? So I pinged Joe and I said, hey, what's going on? What did I miss? And we caught up and we thought, hey, when there are concerns, right, we kind of pride ourselves, especially, we built OCRWC on being transparent, being upfront, on tackling them head on. So I thought, let's all have a discussion, or a tribunal, as Joe calls it, and let's be really open with people. Let's tackle this head on. Let's bring the community together, and then let's move on. So the rules of engagement on this are: we're going to have a civil discussion. We're all going to be professionals in our discussion. We're going to be cordial and collegial towards each other, and we're gonna hash this out and have some some good dialogue. And Joe's probably going to answer some really, really tough questions. So that's it. So those are the guide rails that we're operating on for this call. So that being said, I think we get right into it.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So just to remind everyone, this is live, so everyone taking part, there's a slight delay. We need to try and be aware of not talking on top of each other. In addition to talking about the Mona-gate, we have a ton of questions from the community. You can also post your questions on the YouTube link. We will be getting those up, and anything else we can find. And the guys that we have with us have their own question. So where do we start?
Are we all, can you hear us all?
Yep, we're all here.
Yep.
I just want to thank Adrian for putting this together. This had a lot of foresight. This took a lot of time out of your day, as well as the other folks. So this is great that this came together. Thanks for having us. And sorry about your Sunday.
No, it's all right. I think we messed it up that my phone died. I had to rely on my Apple Watch, but it was a nice break from the devices, which actually is probably one of the things we're going to talk about, right? So. All right, so
let's get straight into it with this. So as we know, there was a picture that was posted that a lot of people had a slightly negative reaction to. Some people weren't sure why, others were offended. Josh, you were one that actually kind of brought it to the forefront quite a lot. So do you want to kick off with what your thoughts were here?
Yeah, I'll first I'll just start by saying thanks to everybody for putting this together. Joe for the time, Adrian, Fran for organizing everything. Joe, I think that the community understands sort of who you are as a person. You have this personality that clashes at times with individuals, and I think that's all well and good. But I think we're at a moment in time where there are individuals in our space and there are pockets of our community that feel underrepresented and at times marginalized. And these posts, specifically on the back of the Barbie Oppenheimer meme, followed by the Mona Lisa picture, we've traditionally struggled to get athletes into our sport, and I'll just say most notably female athletes, especially this year. I'm wondering just your thoughts on, do you feel regret in terms of posting it, or would you have done something differently based on the response? Like, tell me what your thoughts are.
Well, I guess, look, I have two daughters and I have a wonderful wife, and lots of folks that work for us that are the much tougher gender than us boys here. I mean, the intention is never for me or our company to hurt anybody's feelings. Like, our goal is to uplift everyone. Our goal is to change lives. Our goal is to make people not only physically strong, but mentally strong. to dust off, those things. Like our whole goal for 20 plus years, from before it was called Spartan, was to change people's frame of reference, have people become a little more Buddhist, a little more Zen, a little more samurai, right? And just be able to tough through it. So it's not the intention. And if I ever upset people, number one, I apologize. But number two, reach out to me. I'm probably the most accessible human being on the planet. I give everybody my email. Most have my phone number. Reach out. I'm a human being. I make mistakes. We all make mistakes. Many times when I upset somebody, it's to make them better. Hey, you can't finish that Ultra Beast. You'll never be able to get that sprint done. You can't do 300 burpees. That's usually the way I do it. It's never the intent to have a Barbie post upset someone. I collect Barbie dolls. I actually have a whole collection of Barbie dolls. So like, it's confusing for me how, yeah. Anyway, I apologize for that.
Yeah. And that's, it takes a certain kind of person to address the scenario, which is big. And you've always, in the past, you've come right out and you've posted videos that follow up and say, hey, listen, I got feedback from the community. I wanted to address it. The relevance of the statement about, that we went on AI and posted it, and then we saw that it was posted earlier in a different platform. The big thing for me is you made a comment in the threads about relevant conversations on social media. And one of the relevant ones that should be this week is you have a big event coming up this upcoming weekend. And we haven't seen a lot of what's going on. And Adrian and his team have done a lot around building the hype for these events as we approach them. And we're getting closer and closer to championship season. But can you kind of commit to promoting these events in the right way that they should be? Because we have a huge championship event this weekend that we'd love to hear more about, and the athletes that are going to be participating.
Yeah, listen, you've got limited channels. If you're, let's talk about us for a second. Let's talk about Spartan and all its different brands and all the channels around the world. We have a lot of channels. We have a lot of content to push out, and we've got limited attention span. People, including us, everybody watching this, everybody on this call right here, are focused on whatever we're focused on all day long, and to capture our attention is very, very difficult. So I agree. We could definitely do more. We could send more emails, but then we might get more complaints about, God, could you guys going to send one more email? So it is challenging. No excuses. We're not in the business of excuses. We've got to figure out how to get that content to the folks, how to create that content. Look, there's 350 events in a solid year for us, 350 events outside of DECA. There's only 350 some odd days a year. Like it's pretty difficult to capture everybody's attention and make sure we're hitting the mark all day long, and they're looking when we send it. So yeah, we could do a little less Barbie and we could do a little less Mona Lisa and a little more championships, but like we take 8 million photos a year, 8 million. Over the course of 12 or 13 years, it's 100 million photos. People said, Joe, how about using your real athletes to promote the business? It's 100 million photos we've taken. That's a lot of real athletes. So again, no excuses. Probably didn't answer the question well. I apologize, but it is not easy to capture everybody's attention all day long, every day, and we've got a lot to say.
So let me just hop in here, because this is something that I think has been concerning for the OCRWC crowd, because that's never been the path that OCRWC has gone down in terms of making noise just to create attention. And very valid point, Josh. The lack of women is very obvious here in this call, with me being the only one. So I feel like I have a little something to say here. I will say that using race or gender as a way to get attention is not going to be the best thing. And whilst the post with Mona Lisa was distasteful at best, it was actually the Barbie Oppenheimer post that I personally took offense to. I saw Spartan do it and I liked what they did, because they did a post, for those who don't know, that's had Barbie, did a Spartan race. Oppenheimer did a Spartan race. I was like, awesome. That's great. That got my attention in a really, really good way. Then Tough Mudder took it and did Barbie did a Spartan race or a Spartan sprint. Oppenheimer did World's Toughest Mudder. Okay. All right. When we've had things like Chris Rogowski getting 100 miles last year at World's Toughest Mudder, and we know for a fact that women are actually better at endurance than men. It is proven that women are better at endurance than men. You actually got that the wrong way round, and that's just downright misogyny. But then for you to take it further again and to say that Barbie did a Spartan race, Oppenheimer did the death race, it's just pushing it. And what worries me about that is you would have got more attention if you'd done it the other way around. But the internalized misogyny, which you probably don't know exists, which exists everywhere, led you to make that post. And then the excuse is, we're doing it for attention to get people to come and race. If you're using the things that people go through to get attention to come and race, I don't know if that's the right track.
Yeah, shame on us. I will tell you, we get a lot of anecdotal evidence over the years that maybe misinforms us. So I'll give you examples. People will come up to me at races. I'm sure, Chris, you've experienced it, Giles, Kyle, et cetera, go down the list. All of us have probably had this experience. And they somehow stumbled upon this sport. They stumbled upon Spartan, Tough Mudder, Savage, you name it. They stumbled upon the sport. Sorry, Adrian, OCRWC. And you don't know how they got there. They don't know how they got there. They bumped into somebody. And it's not like folks are, they fit a certain mold. You know, our sport has every size and shape. It looks more like an airport than a gym in some ways, right? And so I've always viewed any noise as good noise because it may somehow uncover that person, right? The older dad, the younger boy, you name it, the mom. We get them all, whether it's death race, World's Toughest Mudder, Spartan race, like we get every size and shape. So I'm just concerned. I'm not opposed to what you're saying, Francesca, but I'm just concerned that if we talk in our echo chamber to ourselves, that's who we'll have at races. Are there better ways to market and better ways to absolutely. But just think about that statement. And I want to be pushed back on anything I say. I want you guys to push back. But again, if we show ourselves and we talk to ourselves and we show each other things we like, we are in our echo chamber talking to ourselves.
I'm not saying we should show each other things that we like, but what I'm saying is you actually could have taken that post the opposite way, but you didn't realize what it was that you were doing, and it would have made more an impact if you'd actually gone with the correct option, which was women are better.
I agree. I agree. I actually agree with you. I think that was a marketing mistake. I think we would have did much better reversing that. By the way, as you say it, I didn't show you. I don't know if you guys could pull it up. I didn't show you the first image I got on AI when I asked for a tough Mona Lisa. It probably would have got a lot more views. Adrian, can we pull it up?
I don't have it, so I don't know. I also don't know if we should pull it up.
Yeah. So it's edgy.
Was
to
that
say
the slightly unusual image that you sent? It was barely even female.
Yes, it was unusual to say the least. And so anyway, but can we talk about AI for a minute? Because AI was also a discussion that, it's a pain point for a lot of people. And I've learned a ton in the last 6 weeks. And if you guys would be willing, I'd love to talk about it.
So,
I think, Joe, before we go on, what I would just add there to the Barbie Oppenheimer point, I think, shame on us with the way we looked at that. I think where those posts came from was a cursory look at one as a light tone and one as a heavy tone. So let's look at a more lighthearted event versus a heavier event. And I think, ultimately we lacked the self-awareness there to realize the way that's so easily perceived, right? What comes across on social is we're showing a post about a female character as the easier route and the true badass route being the black and white photo of a man, which, I don't think was ever the intent of what went up there, but, that's a learning experience for us of what, who our audience is, who we're talking to, and how the points are perceived. I don't think it came from a negative place. I don't think it was ever meant to paint one as weak and the other. I think it was face value, lighthearted, intense.
In that case, if you'd done Ken, it would have been hilarious.
Yes, that, there's the real mistake in all of this. Yeah,
that was a big mistake. By the way, death race, world's toughest mudder, any of our craziest races, it's usually a woman. It's usually a woman, to your point, that crushes everybody in those events. So
well, that's the great thing that comes out of this conversation is the reason people are adamant about their response, right, is because they know they're entrenched in the industry. They know the athletes. I mean, Chris Rogowski has run countless 100 miles this year. She ran 100 miles at World's Toughest Mudder last year. You have Nicole Miracle, who spearheaded the dream team about bringing more women into the sport and going out with her own dime and dollar and bringing folks in because they know that women are underrepresented in our space. And, our sport is about doing tough things. Nobody objects to that. I think it's all about overcoming your fears, right? I don't like to get electrocuted or go underwater, but I'm going to do it, right? It's about challenging yourself, but it's not about gatekeeping and it's not about positioning one over the other, right? And I think that's where the real kind of vitriol came from this response is it seemed like a little bit of, Barbie's the weak and Oppenheimer's the strong, right? And that's what I don't think people got, unfortunately. And Joe, I'm hoping that you sort of take that away, and Chris, you as well. Good on you for the acknowledgement and the apology, because that's really what people are looking for. And at the end of the day, it's about getting people out to these races, getting them out to the events, and yes, challenging them. But we have to be welcoming to everybody in order to do that. And we're lucky enough to have waves and competitions for everybody.
And the good news is,
if I could add one more thing on this, like I deal with hundreds of these, thousands of these things in my non-OCR career, right? So this is like one of those strange moments where like my day job, OCR have all converged to this point, right? And even when I was talking to Joe, earlier, after I woke up and got those messages, it was kind of like a WTF moment, like what's going on, right? Like one of the things I said, it's not, and everyone will say this, it's not the intent, right? It's the impact. It's how it's received. And that means that you got to acknowledge how it's received. You can't tell people how they're going to feel, right? You can't take away somebody else's feelings in those situations, right? And those things become very, very, very hard to account for, especially in marketing, right? But at the end of the day, I think all of us as humans do well to kind of take a step back and say, okay, that happened. Was it malicious, right? Was it malicious? No, I personally don't believe it's malicious. Somebody else might think differently, but it wasn't malicious. But, it's one of those things where as companies try to test out different marketing things, replenish their audience, reach new eyeballs, right? Things go out. And like anybody else, anything else, mistakes get made, people make mistakes, and you learn, right? Which is why we're having this call to learn about some of the stuff, put it behind us, move on, get back to focusing on community and all the cool stuff. So maybe that's a good jumping off point since we're talking about new stuff to talk about AI or whatever else you guys want to talk about, or even some of the questions that come in.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I think we would give ourselves, and when I say ourselves, not just those that I can see on this call, but anybody watching now or later, I would give this community an A+ for inclusivity since the beginning. I mean, I think about the things we've all done together, whether it's all-female race in Saudi Arabia, whether it's seeing what I've seen in these court, like we've done a really good job as a community, not just Spartan, I mean all of us as an OCR community. Bringing people in. Can we do more? Can we have more diversity? Absolutely. But I don't know. You guys agree? I think it's been a great run so far.
I actually think, I'm not going to say we have a problem on inclusivity, but I think we all need to do more, right? Like, let's take a metric, right? I think the last time I saw a stat around runners in the United States, like 60% at the half marathon distance are female, right? Women athletes. Now I look at OCRWC and like 35, 40% of our crowd, right, are women. How do we fix that, right? That's an incremental, that's a meaningful disparity between those two numbers. So how do we solve that? I don't know what the answer is, right? But I do think it's not a problem, but I think it's something that takes focus and energy, and that we need to figure it out.
I
It's
actually have a
interesting.
theory on this, which I've spoken about before, in terms of why we have fewer women in the sport. And it is only my theory, but there is a bigger theory out there that women only take things on, such as applying for jobs, etc., when they know that they can do it. They have certainty they can do it, and men are more likely, much more likely, to just go, yeah, I can do it. I mean, if you ask a guy if he can land a plane without in an emergency, most of you would probably say, yeah, I could just about do it. So for me, my idea is, for women, they just don't think they can do it enough. So we need to get the message out that they can and that it's accessible, which is what I've done since the very, very start. Since I started in OCR 10 years ago and I started the brand Mud Is My Makeup, it was to get ordinary women like myself doing OCR. Not super women, not mega athletes, just very, very ordinary women. And that's something that we need to work on. And I think we should kind of close this point in a minute, but it's something that we need to continue working on in the media with what we do. But those kind of posts, like the ones we've discussed, don't go further to spreading the message to women that it is something that they can definitely do. And it's a greater message within society that it's what we believe. It's not correct, it's not good, but it is something that's there.
One last thought from my side is when we look at the data at our stadium events, and again, anecdotal evidence of having conversations with folks at stadium events, they tend to be much bigger numbers for us from females. And then if I'm at a sprint race or a super somewhere and I bump into a large group of women, they typically came in through the stadium event. So just, Francesca, something for us to think about as a global community.
I think that's really interesting. I think a stadium event might perhaps seem like a smaller thing. It might seem cleaner. You know, the mud itself could be a thing. There are so many aspects to look at, but that's really interesting that that's the case. And I mean, just from a business point of view, it's a huge market that's missed out on.
Huge market.
Yeah. And actually, can we talk about one more thing before we move on? So I know we're gonna catch heat about this, right? Because a lot of questions that came in around like, how was this image generated, right? So yeah. Joe, I know you did a bit on this. I think the community is going to say, okay, the image that kind of sucked or it didn't suck, whatever. But you know, the you know, how it was created was up for debate. So you want to talk about that?
Sure. So I didn't know anything about AI, and I consider myself a Flintstone. Maybe many of you are Jetsons. We've got a team. You know, we've got multiple teams offshore, but one team specifically in Japan that works with SoftBank. That team in Japan 6 weeks ago said, hey, listen, you've got to embrace AI. We've got a way to plug into ChatGPT and create an environment that is solely Spartan or solely Tough Mudder or solely DECA, and it will ingest all kinds of information that we give it so that it can learn. So we can give it your books, Joe. We can give it questions and answers. We can give it images. So that team in Japan has been playing with this thing for 6 weeks. We gave one beta version to some of our employees. And that system, I said, let's see what a tough Mona Lisa would look like. Now it has information that the team over there has fed it, right? So it gave me a Mona Lisa that's very popular on the internet with a Spartan headband. When I use the free version of AI, not ChatGPT, I got the one I sent you guys, which was not something that I felt was worth sharing. So I know for the folks in our community that are, that worked for CSI or they've figured out ways that but they're not in our environment, right? They're not using our ChatGPT plugin. So I apologize if somehow that offended folks. I tried to figure out why specifically that offended folks. And I guess, Francesca, it's for the reasons you said, maybe because, we asked AI to give us what a tough Mona Lisa in the modern day would look like. And maybe she should have looked differently. Like I had a tough time with that, but I apologize. It shouldn't have been done.
Great. I mean, I don't think we can tackle it any further than that. Go on, Russ.
Yeah, so just a little background. After this event happened the other day, Joe and I we have been emailing back and forth, and he challenged me to gain 100 questions for him. And some of them that we've gotten a response are specifically what we've spoken about so far today. And specifically 2 questions, Joe, that have come up is, one, it seems that Spartan doesn't have a specific marketing plan. It seems that at times it's whatever it is, let's throw it against the wall and let's see what sticks, or let's just see what happens. And for some people, that doesn't seem to work or reach out to them. And along with that, the second part to this is that there are many people, and we've just talked about this a little bit, who don't fit the mold of the super elite athletes. And some people that have reached out to me with questions or comments have come up with, can Spartan or should Spartan feature more regular people? Because those are the people who are really going to fill the gates and fill the heats. And that's something that's come up with people curious about because they feel undervalued or underappreciated as the regular everyday athlete.
Yeah, so a couple of response. You want me to respond, guys? Francesca?
Yep, go for it.
Yeah, couple of things on that. It's a shame that it feels like we don't have a marketing plan. We've got 50 to 60 people globally that work in marketing, and so we definitely have to solve that. But in fairness, it has been a hell of a 3 years. We've lost people, we've gained people, we've been barely hanging on. It's been a hell of a 3 years. So maybe it felt better, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Even with a tight marketing plan, we are going to throw stuff up against the wall when it comes to social media, because that's the way you play social media. Hopefully you don't offend anybody. Hopefully you're able to make some noise and bring in some of that outside audience, but you are going to throw some stuff against the wall. You're going to try to remain relevant. You're going to have your ear to the ground and listen to what news is relevant today and try to weave yourself into that story. Can we use more of the regular people? Sure. Like I said, we take, last count, 8 million photos a year of individuals. Over the years, we've used, I'm making up a number, it has to be 100,000 of those front and center, those regular people, every size and shape. Can we do more of it? Sure. I think, look, and again, I love your ideas. Anybody listening or anybody watching this, we've had Prince Harry. We've had the Kardashians. We've had Serena and Venus Williams. We've had Gerard Butler. We've had Lance Armstrong. You go down the list of people that have been involved with this brand and been front and center, they don't really move the needle. They don't even move the needle for us. What tends to move the needle is something that's completely unexpected, and it brings somebody into the ecosystem. I don't know why.
Sorry, Joe. Yeah, I'll add to what Joe is saying. I mean, I think, in massive caveat, I'm not a marketer. I'm on the product team, so developing the product itself. But I think the way Spartan generally approaches marketing, there's sort of 2 pieces, right? There's just showing what we do and what we produce and talking about the events we have. Josh, to your point, talking about the championships, showcasing the athletes, and that's for folks who know what Spartan is and are interested and want to get all the nitty-gritty details. And then there's the things that our marketing team will produce, which are to get eyeballs in and attract more people and just get that hook so people learn about the sport and then are interested enough to come in and look more. I think in both of those areas, there's the opportunity for us to show athletes of all different, backgrounds and ability levels. It's one of the really cool things with us having a portfolio of events now with Tough Mudder and Spartan, and we have so many athletes to showcase. And we have Chris running 100 miles at World's Toughest Mudder last year, and we have our Weekend Warriors coming out and running through electroshock therapy. We have so many athletes to showcase, and it's good to have a blend, right? We show really aspirational athletes that have been training at this for years, and that's where how we grow the professional sports side. That's how we get it to the Olympics. That's how people get interested and want to push their own boundaries to work their way up. And then we have folks who are just doing something that makes them super uncomfortable, and that's great too. We can make positive changes in their lives as well. I think to the original point about what happened with the Mona Lisa post, it was a massive mistake, on the team's part of taking something that, where we should be showing really aspirational athletes that are fit and have worked for a long time, and mistaking that for a hypersexualized post that AI generated and not catching that and not seeing that for what it was. To Adrian's earlier point, there wasn't malicious intent, but it was a bad judgment call using a new technology that really missed the mark of what, the types of athletes that we try to showcase along the way. To what Joe said, there's a marketing plan. We have a great team working on it, but it's always important for us to look at the balance of what we're creating and how much we talk to our existing audience and how much we talk to, new potential customers to keep getting fresh blood into the sport and helping it to grow with time.
Here's some.
I think what Joe said is.
I just want to say one more thing. There's Francesca. If you go, Francesca, then I'll go.
I was just going to say, I think what Joe said is really correct. All brands have a marketing plan in the background, but when it comes to social, which is what everyone sees and everyone talks about, it really is taking it by minute kind of thing. You can't plan ahead. You can kind of go, we would like to focus on this at this point. We would like to kind of cover these stories, but social moves so quickly. You've got to move with it, or you're not taking advantage. And it's such a fantastic tool. It keeps us all connected. It's created this community that we all love, and it's also free marketing for businesses. It's wonderful. Like, it presents so many things. And when it comes down to the other athletes that aren't the ones on the podiums, they really do create a lot of noise when we use those posts. When OCRWC does something that includes people that aren't the ones on top of the podiums, they are getting a lot of traction. People love it. And it's something, something that we're working towards. It's something we will work towards more next year as well. And we have some great ideas for this OCRWC, because the criticism that we always get is that the other athletes that aren't the top 5 don't get the attention. And we agree with that. But there's also another big limit that comes on to giving people attention, and that's unfortunately money, and we can only do as much as we can. But we are working towards it, and we hear it because, again, I was one of those people. I've never been on a podium. We are all very important, and we get it. So over to you, Joe.
I like Francesca. Smart. That was good. I was just going to say AI. I believe AI could actually help this discussion, because as we ingest in this Spartan bot that we've been working on, as we ingest the stuff that's good and discard the stuff that's bad, if you've got 500 employees like us around the globe, you can't watch everything. You're trying to go minute by minute, like you said, Francesca, right? So using it as a tool to, create inspiration, create guardrails, et cetera, could be really powerful. Obviously, we missed the mark, but it gave us a chance now to, come back to center and figure out what I do have. Adrian's not going to let me do it. I do have some much more aligned modal leases that I was able to create. At some point, I'd like to show him if Adrian allows it and Chris allows it. I don't know. Francesca, would I?
100% no.
I'll just tee up on sort of what Chris was talking about, and Fran as well, is when you think about marketing and exposing our product to the larger audiences, one of the things that we as an industry have struggled with is live streaming our events, getting them to the people outside of it. And when I look at large events like UTMB and all of the Aravaipa trail running events, now live streaming these massive events, and they're not on small farms, right? In rural, these are in the mountains of Sweden and everything else. And Will Hicks and team and Jason behind the scenes have done a great job this year of investing their own money to get broadcast to this. But can we talk a little bit about plans for broadcasting? And Adrian, I'll start with you, like plans for broadcasting OCRWC, what we're going to do to ramp it up as best we can and make sure that the sport is seen in the best light for folks that maybe aren't able to attend or don't know anything about it.
Yeah. Happy to. So this is actually something that my thinking has evolved on this within the last year, right? And I think I infamously probably said to Francesca or even to Will at one point, right? Like, I don't get it on the broadcast side, right? Because if you recall, one year, I think it was 2018, we actually produced a show, and it was broadcast on Channel 4 in the UK, which is like one of the largest channels, right? And we bled ourselves dry on that. And I looked at what we spent on that, and I thought to myself, man, do you know what I could do with this event if we had, whatever it was, $70,000, $80,000, right? The stuff the obstacles we could pull off, the swag we could do. And so my thought process was like, okay, I'm just going to sink everything I can into the experience, right? And that might have been the wrong decision, but I feel like broadcast for us is something that if we're going to do it, we have to be able to do it right, and we can't do it at the sacrifice of the other things that we do well. So I don't want to degrade the on-site experience for a better broadcast. Now, the evolution of my thinking has come from the fact that, like, okay, we do need this, right? Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, we had a podcast with Francesca and Joe where I said, I don't care, right? That wasn't that long ago. That was probably 3 months ago, right? But now that you view it as a marketing reach, you view it as part of your core product, and it's something that needs to be looked after as if it was its own event, right? There's almost 2 races that play out on every race day. There's one that happens for everybody on the mountain, and there's another one that plays out for everybody watching on social or YouTube, whatever the platform might be, right? I would love to get back to a point where we're super confident in our ability to do that and do it well, because I think when it doesn't go well, it's more harmful than it is good. Are we there yet? Not sure. I mean, part of that is part of the reason why I'm partnering with Spartan, right? Some of the questions that came in have been like, is this just going to be another Spartan race? Absolutely, 100% not, right? Like, we wouldn't even be putting new tires on the 2 trucks we have in Vermont if that was going to be the case. But we've got to be doing it. We've got to be able to do it well for it to happen, right? So I think that right now in the stage of where we are as an organization, OCRWC needs to find partners to do that. So, sorry, Josh, I don't know if that answers your question, but I think to sum it up, we're dedicated to making it happen, but it has to happen the right way, and that's going to come through partnerships.
Yep. No, and that makes sense. Go ahead, Fran.
Go ahead, Josh. I was just going to say I want to give a big shout out to OCR Report here, even though that might be a little bit biased, because they have indeed been creating fantastic coverage of all events. World's Toughest Mudder last year, Spartan, they've been doing a ton. OCRWC, they were there last year, and they've continued this year, also including Savage Race. So they are working really, really hard and putting in a lot of time and effort, and yes, their own money, to making this happen. And Adrian, I know that I've had a lot of conversations with you over the importance of live streaming and broadcasting, and we are putting together a plan for this year. I don't think we're ready to talk about it yet, and I would prefer not to talk about anything that's not definite for OCRWC, but it's in the works, and as always, we're going to do the best we can for the athletes.
Yep.
And Joe, one of the things that Adrian and team has an advantage of is really just having a single event a year. So the ability to innovate and try something new and invest time, like new obstacles, is easier in their sense. You do have 300 plus events over the course of the world. You've got multi-coastal trucks and teams and everything else. People are constantly asking about new obstacles, innovation in the obstacle space. Years ago, you said, listen, we're not going to get into a war and do multiple obstacles new every year, but you have done some. What's your thoughts today on obstacle innovation and how it can impact the business?
Well, and the answer will somewhat answer that first question too, around media. Just as a thesis, I don't believe we, the whole community and the individual races, should get into an arms race over new obstacles. When I think about basketball, I posted it this week. When you think about basketball, soccer, hockey, you name it, they've stayed static for so many years, yet they're incredibly successful. Now, I guess you could mention that motocross, or there are some sports where things do change, but our terrain changes. We could move the obstacles around. I don't think it's wise to constantly be adding and changing obstacles. I always thought maybe a slight twist once or twice a year, but the reality, and this goes true for media as well, the reality is the last 3 years have been effing hell, right? And so we just don't have the extra capital, even if we believed in it, to do all these things. We just, when we had our way and we had the extra capital, we had an NBC show, we had a second NBC show. We could do all those things. We could add an obstacle here. Just can't do it right now. Right now, it's about rebuilding coming out of COVID. Now, we're almost there. We think we're 9 months away from being normalized. We'll see, right? But even then, you're not going to see us wake up and all of a sudden change all the obstacles, because that's going to excite a bunch of people. The other thing to consider about our community and just people in general, and I think everybody would agree with me here, we're never going to satisfy everyone. I remember during COVID, I decided to go against my own beliefs. And I said, I got to support Governor Cuomo and everybody should wear a mask. And I went and did a video, and half of our community wanted to kill me with pitchforks. And so then I came out and I said, we all need to get outside. We need to be active. And then half the community wanted to kill me with pitchforks. And, if I'm going to put the swim at Killington, it's too cold, and half the community wants to kill me with pitchforks. So, like, if we were selling ice cream, if Adrian and I was selling ice cream and he had chocolate and I had vanilla, like, half want chocolate, half want, like, it's very hard to satisfy everybody.
But, and I can add, it makes sense to me.
Go, Chris.
It has to make sense to me. But I'll add to what Joe said. I mean, now I hesitate to remind him what he's paying me for, but that's not to say there's no innovation in the pipeline. It's to say that we're not in a place as an industry where we have to do it to prove a point. I think many of us that have been around the industry a long time remember, 2013, 2014, 2015, when Tough Mudder and Spartan had to make a big show about who was doing more and, bigger, better, gas flames shooting out of everything. And we were burning through money to prove a point and make a bigger show of it. I think we're lucky to be in a place as an industry now where we can be very intentional and very pointed about how each brand innovates, where and why. I think a part of the sport that's so cool is that OCR is designed to test you in all different ways. There's short formats, you need to be really fast. There's long formats, you need to be able to run for 24 hours. Some obstacles are about balance, some are about upper body strength. There's all these ways we can test people. And in some ways, by updating rigs from time to time or rolling out, specific upgrades here or there, we can test people in a new way to prove who's really the fittest and most adaptable on the day. That just doesn't mean we need massive new obstacles all the time. So as we think of next year, 2024, we're thinking about how to be smart to upgrade the experience and keep it fresh without kitting out all new trailers across the board just to prove a point.
I think it's interesting when you kind of talk about what the scope of Tough Mudder and Spartan is in the US. I don't think people realize how big an operation it is and how one change in the UK, we're talking 5 events in a year. It's very different to doing it across the US and just what that actually means. But as we've got both of you here and we are talking about obstacles and innovation and Spartan and Tough Mudder, one of the questions that's been coming in is obviously the age-old concern about how are Spartan and Tough Mudder going to stay two separate and distinct brands.
I think we've done, you guys tell me, I think we've done a pretty good job separating, keeping the brand separate. I know we've slipped up a little bit in the UK, I've heard, but I think we've done a pretty good job. I know that was the concern of my team, was that, Joe got a hold of Tough Mudder, it's going to become Spartan and this and that. But I don't know, Chris, give us a score, give us a grade.
Yeah, I mean, I think many in the community may know I was with Tough Mudder a very long time and more recently took over doing product for both brands. I think it's really important for us to remember what each brand represents and the reason people come to do those, and then lean in hard when we're doing product design on both sides. And, I'm lucky I've run a ton of Spartan races and Spartan World Champs. I've also done World Toughest and a million Tough Mudders over the years. I think I have a pretty good handle on, the reasons behind each. Tough Mudder, you have the teamwork element, but also more of the mental toughness and the things that are going to be super mentally draining no matter how well you've trained. And you've got Spartan, which is about, testing physical ability and the competition and the sport. And there's things we can innovate on both sides to make them really great. Now, obstacle course racing is obstacle course racing. We're always going to have barbed wire crawls, and both brands benefit from really hard, really long, really low barbed wire crawls. That's just part of doing hard stuff and testing yourself. But a teamwork only obstacle like an Everest or a pyramid scheme at Tough Mudder doesn't make a ton of sense at a Spartan race. And a lot of like the really complex Spartan multi-rigs don't necessarily make sense at a Tough Mudder. And, the same for bucket carries and Atlas stones, all of that sort of stuff. So, I think we're in a pretty good spot, but it's somewhere where, we want community feedback when we start to see bleed between the two. If we feel like we're drifting, then that's something for us to correct. But it's top of mind for us. It's never been the plan to suddenly just now we have assets for both brands. Let's smush them on one truck and just pop them up everywhere. You know, in the US, we have 4 Spartan kits. We have 2 Tough Mudder kits bouncing around the country. Like they're different sets of obstacles, different approach to course design, sort of the whole 9 different obstacle menus there. So we're trying to keep ourselves honest with it, and obviously want the community to do the same for us.
There's a couple of points that I want to come back on that, Chris. Firstly, you brought up barbed wire. we're going to have to go back to that, which is, funny enough, not a question that we got in this huge list of questions I've got from the community, but we will come back around to that. I want to say personally, as somebody who has only experienced Tough Mudder last year for the first time, I was astounded at just how different a brand it is to Spartan, and the fact that there could be confusion that the two could be similar. It's kind of like saying, is a cow the same as a snail? I mean, they're completely different, and then they have a completely different ethos behind them, and I don't think those two could ever be confused, which I would hope, when people see what has not happened with Tough Mudder, would give them faith in what's not going to happen at OCRWC, and that is they're not just going to become one huge brand, which would make no sense again from a business point of view. I agree. I think they're fantastically separate, and that's great. I would go back onto Joe's point, though, regarding the UK and some of the feedback that came from the UK scene, where we were having races that were, and fantastic job done by the crews. It was, it's a lot of work putting on these events, but we were having a Tough Mudder race followed by a Spartan race the next weekend on the same course. And the course was basically branded differently, and a few obstacles were removed. A question that's come in is basically saying as well about the UK. Are we going to get more races in the UK? It involves Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, yet this year it's only been England. So I think in the US, you are doing a fantastic job. And I think the team in the UK have got a lot to work with, and I'm not criticizing anyone there. Being such a small country, we do expect a lot. Are the plans in the pipeline to maintain the separate identities of the brand and also kind of spread it out more around the country, with it being such a big place?
Look, 1,000%. We want to get back to where we were, in 2019, and we want to have plant the flag everywhere we had a flag. We want to make sure both brands are thriving. It is a miracle. I'm just turning off my little sounds here. It is a miracle, and it's a testament to our employees, to our vendors, to our customers, that we survived COVID. It's a miracle. It's unbelievable that we were able to lean in, get shut down globally, give away 450,000 free entries, and somehow come out the other side. So we're just not perfect. It's a shitty answer, by the way. I hate giving that answer, but that's our reality. And without the customers hanging on and continuing to come out and do this stuff, we wouldn't exist. So, to
be honest, I prefer that kind of answer than bullshitting something else. Just we're doing the best we can, and it'll get better. As far as I'm concerned, that's an answer.
Well, to follow up with that, and Joe, I know that you've reported that the company lost probably in the upwards of $15 million in the 3 years between what you've lost and between the amount of events that you had to give away. One of the questions that's come up, and I think you've answered it, but I'll give you the chance to word it yourself. People have issues about the high cost of the events. Obviously, you have to recover some of the funds, and you have to keep money moving forward. So one of the comments that people have questioned is the rising costs of the events in relation to other events from other brands. And again, with what you said about how you kept afloat during the pandemic, just respond to that just so people can hear that from your mouth.
Look, bottom line is we don't charge enough, right? If you're a customer and you're struggling with inflation like we all are, you don't want to hear that. But we do not charge enough for what goes into it. And if we did charge enough, if that was an inaccurate statement that I'm saying, you wouldn't have seen 863 competitors that were putting on events like this go out of business over the last 12 years. It's very expensive to do this at scale and often. Now, everybody should know that anybody on the planet that emails me and says, I'm having a tough time, I really want to come out, can you get me a ticket? I've never said no, not once. So We don't charge enough. Prices are depressed in my. I mean, you look at an Ironman. I don't know how much is an Ironman, Chris and Adrian, like $800, $750, $250 to do a marathon. They don't have to build what we have to build on the side of a mountain during a hurricane. It's just so friggin' expensive. I mean, to ship something with FedEx is like $60. You know, everybody knows my email. If you ever have an issue, I had a guy come up to me once, City Field, veteran, firefighter, said, "You saved my life." We've heard it tens of thousands of times, but this one was pretty serious. He said, "I had a gun to my head. And because I had a race coming up, I didn't kill myself." And I said, "Listen, you and your friends have free races for the rest of your life. You're not going to die on our watch." And so, like, anybody that knows me knows that we just take care. Like, we're doing the currency we get paid in is not in dollars; it's in lives changed. But I do have to make payroll. I do have to pay FedEx. I do have to pay for insurance. Adrian knows it better than anybody. How tough is this business, Adrian?
Yep. I don't think any of us are in it for the cash, right? It just doesn't. It's quite possibly the worst participant-driven business model you could ever imagine, right? Like the Disney World half marathon's like $250, right? That's and that's running on Florida highways and exit ramps, right? Obstacle course racing, you need to be responsible for every single inch of that course because people are crawling, rolling, jumping, diving through it, right? It's just a terrible business model, right? So unless you find some reward, unless you find it rewarding in a different way other than monetary value, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
Adrian and I, Chris,
and Joe, I can actually. No, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, Go ahead.
No, you go.
I was just going to say, based upon what you said, I know for a fact that what you're saying with the free events and how generous you are is true. So I just want to let people know that those aren't words. I know many groups that have gone to you and asked for help with raffles, with donations, and they've never been turned away. So just want to let people know that statement is 100% accurate, and those aren't just words, and I can vouch for that just from my own experiences. So I just wanted to back you up on that so people do know it's true.
Yeah, I think where this, the classic example is as a company grows, right? And by the way, I'm not saying this to give anybody excuses or a way out of anything that has been said or done. But as companies grow and get more successful, right, there's a general assumption that everyone's rolling in cash, right? I mean, heck, just by virtue of us saying, hey, we're the OCR World Championships, right? Like the quotes we get from vendors when we say that are insane. But, I think having conversations like this and connecting with the community are a way for us to get back to the vibe we had. So maybe we should be doing this, I don't know, monthly basis, right? Like Joe, you want to call it a tribunal or something like that? Maybe we do this every month, every couple of weeks, something.
Francesca, why don't you give me ideas on how I could agitate the whole community once a month, and then you guys could put me on the stand once a month.
Well, what I was going to say was exactly the same thing, Adrian, because we came on here with a whole list of questions to talk about, and we've barely got through any because there's been so much. So I definitely think we should get together and do this again. But I think if anyone has any big burning issues, bring them up, because I've got a list of questions that we want to get through with Joe, and we might just do a quick fire round before we close off. And I think we should definitely come back and be doing this again.
And then on Francesca, can you post all the questions and answers that people sent in and the answer, and so that they can get, because we're not going to be able to stay on for all of them. It was a pretty big list of questions.
It was a pretty big list of questions, so I'll have to be talking to you to get those answers, and absolutely we can get them posted. So I'm gonna start throwing questions. Well, this goes to, I guess, Chris, Joe, and Adrian, depending on the branding. But let's go for it, and let's try and get some quick answers in before we have to close off. So, why are races placed on the schedule for us to register when venue contracts permits have not been secured and finalized?
It's a great question. We are working a couple of hundred venue contracts at all times, every day, all around the world. If we waited until those contracts were done, we would have in some cases, 2 or 3 weeks to sell an event. So when we have a handshake, when we have a verbal, when the Forest Service has said it's okay, we start letting people know. If we don't do that, we're going to have a wonderful event with 11 people there.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Why can't we get Gerard Butler or David Wenham to come and MC a few more waves at races?
I didn't catch that one. Chris, did you get it?
No, I didn't. I'm sorry.
I said, why can't we get Gerard Butler or David Wenham to come MC a few waves at more races?
We would have to raise. Yeah, we would have to raise prices by $1.
All right, I'm going to take that as a promise. What goes into your decision when looking for a new venue?
Well, it starts, and Chris, raise your hand at any point, so I know you want to talk. But I'm happy to run with the ones I get. You want it? Go.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think there's a couple of things. Customer experience is a huge part of it, of course, making sure that we can deliver the product that we design. So digging the pits we need to dig, making sure we get the course distances, all of those parameters. And then, of course, there's a business layer that goes on top. How far is it from major metropolitan centers? Can we get the permitting? Can we serve beer? I know Joe doesn't like beer, but we do serve beer. So, all of those layers, can we deliver what we want, and can we actually get people there in an effective way? And the boring stuff. Can we park enough cars? What's going to happen to the parking fields when it rains? All of those sort of like boring behind the scenes things all go in to that decision ultimately.
If you can get a sprout farm, Joe would be all in as a venue.
On that note, for the entire global community, for anybody listening, watching, can somebody reach out to Guinness for me? That is the one beer that would make sense to be a global partner. Everybody should get a Guinness at the end. My 2 cents.
All right. What is your favorite quote? And I'll throw that out to the three, I don't want to say race directors, but the 3 race guys. What's your favorite quote? Joe, you first.
Nobody cares, work harder is my favorite quote. Nobody cares, work harder.
Fantastic. Chris, you go for it.
Oh, no. I have this whole bank of historic quotes with historic figures wearing Tough Mudder headbands very tastefully, and I can't think of any, but we've got some great ones from Teddy Roosevelt. Look up any quote from Teddy Roosevelt. He's so on brand for Tough Mudder.
If in doubt, just quote Rocky. Just go with Rocky.
Okay. Adrian, I did it.
That's what I say to Adrian at the end of every OCRWC, and he hates it. Adrian.
I have nothing. Like, quotes, I can't even remember what I'm doing after this. Like, inspirational quotes, I have no freaking clue.
Okay.
So, something from Fred Rogers. That guy was awesome. That's my hero.
Okay. All right.
I do have one from Winston Churchill. If you're going through hell, keep going.
Nice. Everything you want is on the other side of fear. That's always a great one. With the addition of the Elite 3K and penalty loops this year, a lot about penalty loops, are there going to be any other significant changes coming for the 2024 season?
I think that for 2024 in general, and this isn't specific to 3K and penalty loops, but we are looking at ways to simplify and open up, sort of our championship architecture, the way we run competition. So we do have some exciting updates that I think will be really good for the sport that we're working on right now and we'll be announcing in due course. But the general idea is that we've got a bunch of great disciplines. We want more people coming out and racing them more seriously, and we want the sport to be accessible to all types of athletes. So that it's vague in nature, and we'll have more for you guys, I think, in the next 2 months or so on that front for Spartan and Tough Mudder in particular.
Okay.
Wait, can I jump in right here?
Oh, please go for it. Yeah.
Let me jump on this because I get this question a lot, and about OCRWC. We are not freaking doing penalty loops. Sorry, Chris. Sorry, Joe. You guys probably won't agree with me on this. OCRWC does not do penalty loops. I can't tell who won the race when there are penalty loops. So I need somebody to cross the finish line, and given we have like a very small number of people working our event, I need the person who crosses the finish line to be the winner, not cross and then go do a bunch of penalty loops or exercises somewhere and come back and then tell us they won. Like, I just need to be able to tell. So no penalty loops at OCRWC.
What about burpees?
No, God, no. You're either in the completion club or you're not. That's it. Like, super simple.
And I think
All
what I
right.
can say for our brands and products, we already for World Stuff is Mud or Spartan approach penalties very differently, the way they're designed, the way they're deployed on course. But I think for the community to know, when we look at what the best approach is, we're trying to deliver the right intent at the end of the day, right? How do we make sure that people are rewarded for being trained up and able to do the obstacles when it comes down to the race? And there's different ways to go after that, and there's different ways to penalize. But the ultimate goal, and we'll be focusing on it even more next year, is if you're better at the obstacles, you deserve a competitive advantage. That's it. We need to make sure we optimize and calibrate them so you're not somehow rewarded for skipping an obstacle and doing something else you're better at. Those are a penalty. They should beat you down.
I did see one example of a penalty loop being a game changer in a race, and it was a race in the UK for the women's podium, and one athlete was on the multi-rig right before the finish line and she just couldn't get across, and she had to do a penalty loop, and the other athlete flew across, and that lost the race for her. And she's a very, very good runner, but the obstacles are so-so. And that was a case of where the penalty loop was good, being right before the finish line. However, another question of the penalty loops says, I understand penalty loops have streamlined the races and reduced the need for videos and extra manpower. However, the penalty loops do not come close to matching the time or effort required to complete 30 burpees. The easiness of the loops is evident when racers immediately head for the loop after slapping the obstacle with their hand. There is no motivation to even try. At the risk of Spartan obstacle course racing becoming a glorified trail race with slight inconveniences, what can be done to bring back the emphasis on completing obstacles? What can be done to bring the penalties back in line to be equivalent to 30 burpees?
I mean, hang on, Chris. Nobody wants 30 burpees more than me. Nobody. But go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, well, that's true. No one wants 30 burpees more than Joe. And it's, I would say it's not something we've absolutely ruled out in all instances, but I think my answer to that question is similar to the last one, which is we need to make sure we calibrate whatever it is. If it's burpees or penalty loops, whatever else, it needs to be calibrated for the intended race result. I think back when maybe 2016, I was running WTM and I did an extra 5 miles maybe over the course of that race. It was like 5 to 10% of my overall mileage was on penalty loops. It was so bad that it seriously impacted my race. That's what we need to look at for when we're looking at penalties. And obviously that the actual distance is relative to the race you're running, but it needs to impact your race in a substantial way if you're not passing an obstacle. Otherwise, what's the point?
I'd also just add to that, as an athlete and a spectator, careful what you wish for to the industry, because folks were asking Joe and team about the 3K. Listen, we want harder carries, and we got heavier carries that knocked some racers out. They wanted harder barbed wire crawls, and they got Palmerton's barbed wire crawl. So 30 burpees are challenging, but penalty loops can be more challenging. So be careful what you wish for in some scenarios.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like Joe said, no matter what you do, people will be unhappy. As long as you're doing what you believe the best thing for the event and the sport is, then you can stick by it. So talking about Palmerton, somebody said, looking at the 2023 Palmerton map used for the trail race, there's definitely enough room for a Palmerton Beast. What needs to happen for us to get a Palmerton Beast?
That's above my pay grade. I love Palmerton. We've been there for a while. I don't know if we're going to put a beast there or not. Again, typically over the last decade, the emails I get are from individuals that are trying to get their trifecta the following year and would like to lay out our schedule to fit exactly what they want to do, but it might not satisfy the total need of the business. So I don't know if Chris can answer that question or that's really a question for the team laying out next year.
I mean, what I'll say is we send out some very experienced individuals on the production team to our venues to map out the courses on an annual basis. And they go every year and they scope it out and they sit with the venue. It's generally in our best interest to put more race formats at a venue. So although, our first pass is in a satellite view as well, once you get on the ground, you talk to the venue about where you can go, you see what the dig restrictions are, you start to piece together the event itself. A lot of times the reality is a lot more complicated than it appears at a glance. So if we could, it's very likely we would. without talking to the production team, I don't know exactly what the holdup there is, though.
I mean, that's just kind of answered in a way a lot of the questions that we had, which were about locations and races in certain locations. So I'm gonna kind of take that answer to be covering all of those. So if we haven't got it, very sorry about that. Now, Jason, we've got behind the scenes on production, who's keeping an eye on the YouTube questions. If there are any, Jason, throw them up on screen. But I'll throw a couple more to you. But we've been going for just over an hour, so I'm sure everyone's starting to maybe have enough of the questions right now. We are going to put this out as a podcast as well, so you can listen to it again afterwards. And as we mentioned, we will try and do this again because it has been great. Somebody has asked, can they update the qualifications for this year's championship races to not just be point-based, but also performance-based, i.e. a top 5 finish?
That's a Chris question.
Yeah, so as late in the season as we are right now, there aren't any plans to change sort of the qualification parameters right now. What I can say for next year is that we are looking at simplifying the overall system for qualifying for events. We want to make it easier to follow along. We want it to be more engaging for folks who aren't, already very familiar with the brand. So, we're most likely to see through this season with the qualification parameters we laid out, but next year we're absolutely taking that feedback and looking at a way to simplify it and make it more accessible.
Fantastic. And this, I guess, is another product question. Go on, Joe.
I want to, when we wrap, I just want to say one thing, but I'm good until then.
Okay. We want season and weekend passes in Europe. When?
We want them too. When? We want them too. One thing to consider also, again, here goes Mr. Excuse. We've got different ticketing platforms in different parts of the world. We've got technology, different websites. Not everything is connected together as well as we would like. When it is all connected together, we'll be able to do that more easily. Unbreakable Pass was a nightmare for my team to figure out, but we had to get it done, and we got it done. That's not ideal. Until we get all these systems talking to each other and working, it might not be there as quickly as we'd like.
Okay. So unless we have any questions coming in from YouTube, I think we're going to wrap it up there, unless anyone here has anything else that they would like to say as a go for it.
One quick one. I just want to reiterate from earlier. When we got involved and visualized what this movement, this sport, this community would be, the thing that got me personally most excited wasn't six packs or podiums or headbands or any of that. It was changing people's frame of reference. It was getting people to just dust off things that, the everyday person might get upset at. And I took a psychology class back in the 80s, and it changed my whole life. When the professor taught me that you look at a situation, you look at a customer in a restaurant that doesn't leave a tip for a waiter, and you automatically assume that person's cheap, and you say something about that person, that doesn't mean that that's reality. The reality is that the prior waiter might have dumped soup on the gentleman's wife, might have knocked the guy's wig off, might have stepped on his foot. Who knows what happened? Maybe he had no money. You just don't know what happened. And so when we all jump to conclusions and we make assumptions about folks and we get mad, that's not what I had hoped the community would be, because these were tough people. These were people that climbed ropes, that crawled under barbed wire, that went the extra distance, that wouldn't complain about a cold shower, so I just want to remember that. I just want to take the edge off all of us. By the way, I slip up. I get mad at silly things. And what gets me most excited is if we change 100 million lives, again, not changing in the sense that they get six packs, changing in the sense that these are people that just don't break. They don't break when the Wi-Fi doesn't work on the airplane. They don't flip out when, they give people, a chance. My 2 cents. So you guys are awesome. That was Tribunal 001. I survived, I think. You guys are amazing. Chris, amazing. Everybody on this call, amazing. Francesca, you deserve an Academy Award. You're amazing.
Well, thank you for that, Joe. And, thank you for joining us to face the questions, which could have been a lot heavier than they were, to be honest. I really appreciate the way that you've answered them and allowed us to be. And just for, full transparency, before this, Joe said, throw it at me. I really don't care. Ask me what you want. I'm here to answer questions. He's not here to shy away. And Adrian, thank you for coming on as well with OCRWC to kind of put your athletes' minds at rest, because I know for you, #athletes first, it's always so important that you do things the right way for your athletes. Chris, it's been fantastic to have you as well and to hear from the Tough Mudder side. And Russ and Josh, thank you for bringing the community side and asking your questions as well. If anybody has anything else to say, speak now, and if not, I will wrap it up.
Francesca, also just ask a question to the community. Can we, when we release the Spartan bot and folks are able to go in there and ask it questions, can there be, can we have different versions of the Mona Lisa that it serves up, or should we just completely take Mona Lisa off the spot? Look, Chris is rubbing his face.
If you want examples of incredible women, just look at any course you've got out there, and you do not need AI to be creating a fantasy woman for you. We have the most amazing women you will ever meet every single weekend out there without a computer getting involved. So that's my 2 cents on that.
I like that. We could serve up some real people out there. See you guys.
Let's do it. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining me. I think we'll probably definitely do this again, because I, for one, had a great time. I loved getting your questions in, and hopefully in the future we can get even more in from the community, have other people joining us. That would be fantastic. Thank you to the OCR Report for putting this on. Just a reminder, the OCR Report do an extensive coverage of races all across the US, and it is all funded. If you want to help and you want to promote the sport that you love and help them keep doing that, you can join the Patreon. It's patreon.com/the OCR Report from as little as $5 a month, and we will keep bringing you things like this. This will be made into a podcast with the OCR Report. We'll probably get it over to OCRWC as well, and anybody else who wants it, because I think this was a great platform to ask questions. And yeah, guys, I can't wait to do it again.
Awesome.
Thanks,
guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.